Today we are going to continue chapter 3. This is session number 3 in chapter number 3, talking about the interest for the general fund and the special revenue fund. We started last time talking about the different types of transaction. Okay, different types of transaction, including a lot of transactions to be conducted by the government in relation to the general fund account, and actually we reached for the short-term borrowing or the short-term loan, and we started to do the entry for that, and actually we reached for number 13, transaction number 13, short-term external borrowing, and it is usually, as we said before, done with banks. And of course, as we said, as long as it is with bank, it is with an external party, and actually the receipt of the loan and the principal repayment do not affect the fund balance, and the payment will not affect only the fund balance. Right. Let's see the entry itself. As you can see here, the government borrowed 20,000 on short-term note from a local bank to compensate for general fund cash shortage. طبعا, as we explained last time, you have to remember that we said whenever we have a short-term borrowing and long-term borrowing, we said we are recording due to and due from, or advance to or advance from. Okay, and actually why we didn't use that in that transaction, because actually here we are talking about external parties. This is why we said debit cash and the credit short-term notes payable. Whenever we are dealing with other entities other than a governmental parties, we have to record it as normally as we record in any borrowing transaction. We debiting cash because we received cash, and we crediting short-term notes payable because we credited short-term notes payable. Type partial loan repayment. Type 5,000 of the principal and 600 of the interest were paid from the general fund on short-term notes payable. طبعا here we have to make a compound entry. What is compound entry? يعني more than one account خلاص in one of the two sides of the entry. يعني for example we paid 500 principal and 600 of interest, يعني which means in the credit will be cash for 5,600. Cash will be credited for 5,600, and we are paying the principal amount, which is the 5,000. So we debited the short-term notes payable, because when we borrowed here, we credited short-term notes payable. So whenever we are going to repay, we have to debit it because it decreased. And in the same time, we paid an interest of 600. This 600 will be recorded as expenditures. We said any expenses inside the governmental entity will be recorded as expenditure, and the details will be recorded in specific accounts called the subsidiary ledger. The subsidiary ledger. Okay. Right. The extraordinary and special items. What are the main criteria for an extraordinary items? It is used in the financial accounting and in the governmental accounting. Right. It is an event that is not under the control of management and is both unusual and infrequent. Unusual and infrequent. Right. The second type of event is the special item. Right. The special item is only to be used in GASB, in the governmental accounting, and the event is under the control of management and is either unusual or infrequent. يعني this event does not include both criteria here, unusual and infrequent. It is either unusual or infrequent. Okay, طيب, let's see what are the nature of these transactions. Here we have a transaction. Said governmental unit decide to sell section of each property owned by the city for 2,000. يعني the government decided to sell part of its chores, okay, for 2,000. طيب, is that a special item or extraordinary? No, it is special item. Why it is a special item? Because actually it is usual but infrequent. يعني it is usual for the government to sell part of the chores to one of the investors, but actually it is infrequent. Okay, so this is special item. طيب, احنا we received cash, so I said debit cash 8,000. Type and the credit special item, and I will write what special item nature is. Proceeds from sale of each property. Okay, this is what have been received from or against selling the peach property. This is in the general fund. Don't forget, we are recording in the general fund. But what about the non-fund account? Non-fund account. The land will decrease because you sold. Okay, nothing happened in the general long-term liability, and the net asset will be minus 2,000 because the land decreased. يبقى this is the effect of special item. Okay, طيب, an extraordinary item. A new computer purchased by governmental unit for 6,000 was destroyed. The unit received 5,750 from insurer. The company had made insurance on that computer. So whenever that computer destroyed, they received 5,750 from the insurer to cover the cost of replacing the computer. Okay, so actually here the value is 6,000 and the 250 is deductible under the policy. Okay, طيب, I received cash for that amount, 5,750, to be considered as an extraordinary item. Insurance recovery proceeds for 5,750. طيب, and the effect on the non-fund account. The land decreased, sorry, not land بقى, computer. Okay, this is computer. Here, this is the PC that have been, okay, destroyed, decreased by 6,000. Why 6,000? Because the value, if you remember, we did that when we used to show the effect on the equation. Okay, we used to decrease the asset that have been sold by cost or book value, which is exist. يعني in some cases احنا we decreased cost, in some other cases we decreased the book value. When I said when you have the book value had the priority. Okay, it has to be deducted. If you don't have the book value, use the cost. فهير احنا we don't have the book value, but we have the cost, which is the 6,000. So actually this is why I decreased here, okay, the computer from the general capital asset. Okay. طيب, other transaction event بقى. Preceding entry were for event common to all governments. Following entries may or may not occur for every government. يبقى next are non-recurring transaction. طيب, collecting tax and other receivable. Tax receivable 160,000 and account receivable 15,000 were collected. يبقى actually tax receivable 160,000, account receivable 15,000 were collected. طبعا cash with the total was, which is 175,000, and credit tax receivable current 160 and account receivable 15,000. Okay, cash 175,000 and credit tax receivable current because we collected within the due date, and the other account receivable related to the other services or whatever is entitled to the government to collect. Type to reclassify taxes as delinquent. What do you mean by delinquent? Delinquent means something that was due but we didn't receive within the due date. Okay, so actually it must be reclassified. It must be reclassified. اللي هو current taxes receivable and the related allowance were reclassified as delinquent after the due date. يعني for example, if we had the first transactions that we just talked about, we said debit account tax receivable and we used to write current. Okay, and we credited the allowance for doubtful accounting current, and then the tax revenue. طيب, now the due date has come but the taxpayer didn't pay. طيب, me بقى at the government I have to reclassify from tax receivable current to tax receivable delinquent متأخرات. Okay. طيب, فالtax receivable current was debited, فأنا I will credit it in order to eliminate, and I will create a new account called tax receivable delinquent. This means starting from that point I know that there is 40,000 of the tax receivable has not been received within the due date. They are past due now. And as long as you reclassified the tax receivable, you have to reclassify, okay, all the related account, which means the allowance account that we recorded in the credit side as current, we have to debit it allowance for uncollectible taxes current, okay, to be debited in order to decrease it, and I have to credit or create a new allowance account for uncollectible delinquent. يبقى whenever you reclassify the delinquent taxes, you have to reclassify both the tax receivable and the allowance for uncollectible account. Okay. Then, which is revenues that have been accrued before were collected, taxes, licenses, and permits. يعني ايه؟ احنا we received cash خلاص for service that have been done. يعني for example حضرتك you went to the traffic مثلا authority, okay, and actually you paid money in order to get your car license or driving license. يبقى in that case the government will record right away, okay, debiting cash and crediting a revenue. Debiting cash and crediting revenue. And this is actually واخد بالك يعني a normal revenue transaction. Okay. طيب, ordering goods and services. طيب, whenever the government purchase orders, okay, for the following functions and amounts like public safety, health, and sanitations. طيب, we don't need here to make a journal entry because actually we ordered and we didn't receive anything yet. So no journal entry is required until goods or services are received. يبقى whenever we are making orders but we didn't receive it yet, we cannot make an entry until the good or the service are received. Right. Collecting delinquent taxes. Okay, 20,000 of the delinquent taxes, receivables, and related interest and penalties of 200 were collected. From where the penalties and interest came, as I said before, the tax law is stating that whenever you are not going to pay the tax within the due date, there will be a fine or a penalty to be paid. And this is to be calculated by month, like the tax, like the value added tax, the VAT tax. They are incurring 1.5% interest over the amount, the overdue amount, every month, which means that per year you are paying 18%, which is higher than the interest rate given by bank if you are depositing that money in a bank account. Okay. Revenue are for interest and penalties are not previously incurred, which means I will debit cash 20,200 and the tax receivable, which is the principal amount of taxes, 20,000, and interest revenue was 200. I can write it interest revenue, by the way. يعني tax receivable delinquent, I will decrease بقى or eliminate the tax receivable amount, and I will credit the interest revenue, this one, interest, for the amount of يعني انتوا فاهمين بقى ان دي interest. ماشي. Okay. طيب, purchase of an investment, 10,000 of temporary investment were purchased. the government purchased a temporary investment for 10,000. Okay, and actually this to be done through two standards from the GASP statement, 31 and 40. And 31 is telling us that the investment must be reported or to be recorded at fair value. Okay, and 40 طبعا address risk issues related to the investment, but طبعا احنا we are going to stop at recording that at fair value. This is all what we are caring about. So actually it will be investment debit and credit cash. طيب, accruing other expenditures. Expenditure were vouchered for different purposes. Okay, so actually again debit expenditure as normal and the credit voucher payable, because we said before any expenditures okay will be debited and the voucher payable will be credited. Actually here we have 23,000 as an equipment part of that expenditure. This is why I went to the non-fund account and I increased the equipment by 23,000 minus 0 equal 23,000. Okay. Paying the amount owed by the government, the voucher payable was paid for 360,000. Okay, so as we are paying any payable in any organization, I'm going to debit voucher payable and I'm going to credit cash for the same amount. Okay, so actually this is a normal payment transaction. Type inter-fund transaction. Type inter-fund transaction, payment to internal service fund of balance. Oh, the internal service fund, this is a fund below the enterprise sorry, the proprietary fund. Okay, and it provides services only for the governmental entities. For the governmental entities. Type. He is saying that 22,500 was paid from general fund on the balance owed to the stores of the internal service fund. يبقى actually you are going to pay هنا due to, if you remember, because we are dealing with the governmental entity. It is due to internal service fund and the credit cash. But what was the original entry? The original entry was debiting expenditure and due to internal service fund. And whenever we paid, we debited the due to internal service fund and we credited cash. Type. To collect the account receivable, as we said before, 13,000 were collected in account receivable. طبعا it is cash and credit tax account receivable or tax receivable, depending only on the type of the account receivable that you have. Type. The write-off. What is the write-off? The write-off when you find out amount of account receivable that is uncollectible. يعني you are sure in the government will not be able to collect this amount. The write-off we explained before, you studied before in accounting 2 and in intermediate account, supposedly in intermediate accounting 1, when we used to write off the account receivable when we find an account or a customer that is not able to pay, and in that case we have to debit the allowance for uncollectible account and credit the account receivable. Allowance for uncollectible, because the allowance was established for that purpose. This is the main purpose for the allowance. Whenever we will find one of our customers, taxpayer, that is not able to pay, we are going to take that amount as if we are paying from the allowance for that account receivable. يعني if he will pay, if the customer or the taxpayer supposed to pay, the entry was supposed to be debiting cash and crediting account receivable. But in case of the write-off, I'm replacing the cash with the allowance for uncollectible account. فadd if in the amounts that I already saved or restricted or retained in the allowance for uncollectible was an emergency to face the situation where the customer or the taxpayer will not be able to pay. This is the main purpose for the allowance for uncollectible account. طيب correction of error. طيب in the normal cases in financial accounting, if we have an error, where to correct that error? طبعا if it is in the same period, I will مثلا reverse the entry, أو I will make another entry with the difference, واخد بال حضرتك, that will correct the error. But if you are going to discover, or you already discover an error that is related to previous years, what should you done? You have to make a correction of error entry, but actually you cannot affect the previous year financial statements or accounts. This is why we are using the retained earning as a portal for the previous year accounts, because actually at the end of the year you are closing all the revenues inside the retained earning, all the expenses or the expenditures in the retained earning. So whenever we are making a correction for an error that happened during the previous years, we are doing that through the retained earning. Type. What is the replacement of the retained earning in the governmental entities? طيب تعالوا نشوف. طيب فبيقول هنا the audit disclosed that 20x0 expenditure and liability of 300 has not been recorded at December 31. طيب in order to make a correction of error, I will say, because this is liabilities that have not been recorded, so actually the liability must increase, so this is why I credited the voucher payable. And I will debit some account called correction of prior year errors. Correction of prior year errors. So actually this account is one under what we call the fund balance account. The fund balance here, okay, is the replacement for the retained earning, okay. This is fund account, fund balance, okay. This account, which is correction of prior year error, is part of the fund balance account. As if you return back to the financial accounting, you will find that we have the adjustments and correction of error for previous years under the retained earning account. طيب طبعا ده الكوركشن اوف براير يير errors. هو هنا بيقول some wonder about using the correction of prior year account since the previous year's expenditure account have been closed, as we just explained. It cannot be charged to that account, so we are using the unreserved fund balance account is an option, but doing so would hide the errors. So actually we have to use the CPYE account that will be closed in the unreserved fund balance or the fund balance as we explained. طيب the adjustments. طبعا انتوا pretty sure ان انتوا حضراتكم you are aware of adjusting entries. احنا we have 4 adjusting entries if you remember. We have the prepaid expenses, unearned revenue, accrued expenses. The same are here with some minor changes. He is saying that we have under the revenue adjustment interest on investment and delinquent taxes, and this is accrued revenue because it is interest to be collected later. Unbilled charge for services, this is liability for the people, but actually it is revenue for me. Unrestricted intergovernmental grants that are due but have not been received yet, okay, which means in احنا we are entitled to receive grant from other persons. Expenditure adjustments like the interest on short term, and this is interest payable, and accrued payroll, okay, which is the payroll that we didn't pay yet. طيب let's see one of that, which is the interest and penalties. Interest and penalties on taxes of $550, of which 50 is expected to be uncollectible, had accrued at year end. So actually here we are talking about interest that is due but not collected yet, due to be received by الحكومة. طيب we are going to debit interest penalties receivable and crediting allowance for uncollectible interest and penalties with revenue, which is interest and penalties. Why didn't we say current? Because actually here we are already overdue, past due. So actually we don't have to write here any current or delinquent, because as long as انت you are doing an interest, so actually this is already a past due amount. Here we are going to stop for today. Next time inshallah we are going to complete that.